The purpose of this demo is to show a new condition from AWS, which will allow you to control AssumeRole. If your company is adapting AWS landing zone or control tower approach to create hundreds of accounts, and you are worried a malicious insider will create the same role name in external organization to infiltrate data, this permission policy will assure AssumeRole is confined within intended organization. On my screen right now is my corp organization. Within this organization, I have two OU set up. One is prod and one is QA. In this organization, I also have three users set up. The first one is test user -1, and this user is set up to be able to assume role. This user is allowed to assume any very important role as long as that role is within my corporate organization. The second user that I set up is the org path prod user. This user is allowed to assume into very important role as long as that role sits within my organization and is within my prod OU. The third user I set up is org path QA user. This user is set up to allow assume role into very important role as long as the role sits inside of my organization and is also in my QA OU. So inside of every single account of my organization, I have set up a very important role, and that role trusts root of my entry account. Now, I know root is not a good trust, but in order to demonstrate that I'm able to control which OU that you can assume into, so I use root as an example. But normally, I will not trust root. I will normally be very, very fine-grained to trust only one role or one user. Now I'm going to show my malicious organization, which is the organization that I have also set up a very important role, which trusts exactly the same account root. So now the demo. The first user I'm going to test is my test user 1. This test user 1 should allow me to assume into any very important role within my organization. So let me first try to switch over to the very important role in the same account number. And the switch role is successful. Now I'm going to try to switch role into the very important role in my production OU. And the switch role is also successful. Now I'm going to switch over to the very important role in my QA OU. So the very important role switch is also successful. Now I'm going to try to switch over to malicious OU. With the same role name. And as you can see, the switch role failed. Now I'm going to sign on as my org path prod user. And this user should only be able to assume role into prod OU accounts. So I'm going to first try to assume into an account that's not in prod OU. And the assume role failed. And now I'm going to try to assume role into my prod OU account. And the switch role is successful. Try another account that's not in my prod OU. The switch role also failed. Now I'm going to sign in as my org path QA user. And this user should only allow me to switch into the very important role inside of the QA org. So I'm going to try first the QA org role, and the switch account is successful. Now I'm going to try a very important role that's outside of the QA organization, OU, and the switch failed. I'm going to try the prod OU. The switch also failed. So that concludes my demonstration on the resource org ID and resource org path control.